what if I told you that the great Egyptian empire, known for its pyramids and pharaohs, was built not only on stone, but also on blood and iron? For thousands of years, the New Kingdom dominated the Middle East, from Nubia to Syria, but this hegemony was not based on diplomacy. It was forged in the fires of battle with an arsenal that struck terror into the hearts of its enemies. This arsenal was the result of thousands of years of evolution, trial and error, and the ingenious borrowing of technology from those they defeated. From simple spears to formidable chariots, each weapon was a cog in a ruthless war machine. We tend to think of ancient Egypt as a civilization of priests and scribes, but its true backbone was its soldiers. Watch this video to the end to find out which weapon allowed Ramses II to prevail in the Battle of Kadesh, and why the Egyptian sickle sword became one of the most recognizable symbols of the ancient world.
We fight for Egypt!
I'm going to reveal the most closely guarded secret of Egyptian military power, and it will surprise you. Forget about golden masts and complex hieroglyphics. The true symbol of Egypt's power was the simple spear. This weapon was so ubiquitous and fundamental that it is often overlooked in favor of more impressive axes and swords. Early Egyptian spears were simple, consisting of a pointed wooden stick or a simple flint tip tied to a shaft. But with the rise of metallurgy, they became formidable weapons. The bronze leaf-shaped tip was sharp, durable, and relatively cheap to produce. The main strength of the Egyptian infantry lay in its formation, the famous phalanx. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, putting forward a wall of large shields and long spears. This formation was almost impenetrable to frontal attacks by enemy light infantry. The spear allowed soldiers to strike while remaining at a safe distance under the protection of their shields. The length of the spear varied, but on average it was between 1.5 and 2.5 meters. This gave the infantryman a decisive advantage in reach. While an enemy with a short sword or axe had to get close, an Egyptian could strike him from a distance. In a mass confrontation, this factor became decisive. In addition to infantry spears for close combat, the Egyptians also actively used throwing javelins. These were shorter and lighter, with a thin tip designed to pierce light armor. Before the main clash, the infantry ranks rained a veritable storm of javelins down on the enemy, disrupting their formation and sowing panic. This weapon required not so much personal skill as discipline and coordination. The Egyptian army was the first to understand the power of standardization and mass training. Each recruit spent hours practicing actions in formation, learning to hold the line and deliver simultaneous thrusting blows. It was this discipline, combined with the simplicity and effectiveness of the spear, that formed the foundation of the army. Warriors with hoplites and battle axes were the elite, but the brunt of the battle was borne by nameless spearmen. They were the backbone of the empire, holding the front line. The spear was the weapon of the common soldier, the workhorse of war. It was not surrounded by the same aura as the pharaoh's sword, but without it, there would have been no empire. It proved that in war, it is often not the most sophisticated solution that wins, but the most widespread and reliable. The Egyptian army was not just a crowd, but an organized force, where each type of troops played its role. Spearmen created an impenetrable wall, allowing other types of troops to deliver decisive blows. This system was perfected to...
Spearmen, hold steady and clear the path!
We would love to hear your opinion. Do you think it is fair that such a simple weapon as a spear remains in the shadow of more beautiful swords? Write about it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next studies. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the Egyptians broke through enemy defenses? If the spear was a weapon of defense and formation, then the battle axe reigns supreme in close combat. This weapon has come a long way in its evolution, transforming from a simple tool into a specialized means of destruction. In the early and old kingdoms, Egyptian axes had a heavy, semicircular blade similar to working tools. They had enormous cutting power and were effective against unarmored enemies. Such weapons inflicted terrible wounds, easily crushing bones and cutting through leather or wooden shields. The situation changed dramatically with the arrival of the Hyksos, who brought new military technologies to Egypt, including more advanced armor. The old axe proved ineffective against metal helmets and armor. Egyptian armorers were forced to look for a new, more lethal design.
For the Black Land!
This led to the famous epsilon axe, named for the shape of its blade, which resembles the Greek letter. It was a narrow, elongated blade with several attachment points to the handle. It no longer chopped, but pierced, concentrating all the force of the blow in one point. This new design was a real engineering breakthrough. The narrow blade easily pierced bronze helmets and armor, which were useless against such a weapon. The Egyptian infantry regained the advantage in close combat. The axe handle was relatively short, which allowed it to be used effectively in close combat. It was often used in conjunction with a shield. Warriors armed with axes usually formed assault troops, which were supposed to break through the enemy's formation after the spearmen had engaged them in battle. There were also axes with long handles that could be used from a chariot or to fight enemy horsemen. But it was the short infantry axe that became one of the symbols of the New Kingdom warrior. It was relatively cheap to produce and extremely effective. In addition, the axe had ceremonial significance. Many richly decorated axes are found in the tombs of pharaohs and nobles. They served as a symbol of power and military prowess, emphasizing the role of the ruler as the chief warrior and defender of Egypt. Archaeologists have found plenty of evidence of the use of this weapon. Reliefs in the temples of Karnak and Abu Simbel depict pharaohs striking down their enemies with such axes. It was not just a weapon, but an instrument of imperial propaganda. In the next chapter, we will talk about a weapon that combined the power of an axe with the symbolism of royal power. Are you ready to find out why the Egyptian mace struck fear into even the most experienced warriors? Guess which weapon was so important that it was depicted in the hands of gods and pharaohs thousands of years before the empire came into being? It was the mace. Long before Egypt was unified, back in the pre-dynastic period, the mace was the main weapon and a symbol of status. It survived the centuries, retaining its significance even in the New Kingdom. Early maces were simple clubs with a thickened end. However, the Egyptians soon figured out how to reinforce it with a stone cap. Diorite, an incredibly hard and heavy stone, proved to be the ideal material. A pear-shaped or disc-shaped diorite head attached to a sturdy wooden handle turned the mace into a fearsome weapon. Unlike an axe or sword, the mace did not cut or chop. Its purpose was to crush. One precise blow with such a mace could crush a skull, even in a simple leather helmet. It was ideal against enemies who did not have metal armor, which was the norm in the early and Middle Kingdoms. With the advent of more sophisticated bronze armor in the New Kingdom, the combat value of the mace began to decline. It could no longer break through a helmet as effectively as a specialized axe. However, it did not disappear from the battlefield, but rather changed its role. Richly decorated ceremonial maces are found in the tombs of nobles. They were made of precious materials, covered with golden carvings, and were not intended for combat. They were insignia emphasizing the high social and military rank of their owner. Thus, the mace went from being a primitive club to a sacred symbol of pharaonic power. It reminds us that in the ancient world, weapons were not only tools but also carriers of deep cultural and religious meaning. If you enjoy learning about how ancient objects combine practical and symbolic functions, please like this video. What you are about to learn will change your perception of ancient swords. When we think of an Egyptian warrior, we often imagine him with a khopesh. This bronze sickle-shaped sword is perhaps the most famous and unique weapon of ancient Egypt. Its unusual shape is not a whim of the armorers, but the result of ingenious tactical calculation. The khopesh was not invented in Egypt. Historians believe that it originated from more ancient Sumerian and Akkadian sickle-shaped swords. The Egyptians probably encountered this weapon in battles with the peoples of Canaan and Syria and quickly appreciated its lethal potential, adapting it for their army. The khopesh was unique in its design. It had a handle like a normal sword, but its blade was curved like a sickle. As a rule, only the outer, convex side of the blade was sharpened. The total length of the weapon was about 50-70 centimeters, which made it ideal for close combat. The main advantage of the khopesh was its hybrid nature. It combined the penetrating power of an axe with the cutting properties of a sword. Thanks to its weight and curved shape, it could deliver terrible chopping blows that could break a helmet or split a shield. But the khopesh was not just a chopping tool. Its curved blade allowed for unexpected maneuvers. A warrior could hook an enemy's shield with it and pull it aside, opening a gap for a strike. It could also be used to hook an enemy's arm or leg. In the next chapter, we will look at the weapon that allowed Egypt to defeat its enemies before they even entered close combat. Are you ready to learn about the technological marvel that changed the rules of war? Egypt's arsenal included a weapon comparable to modern high-precision weapons. It was a composite bow. This technological marvel was not an Egyptian invention. It came from the Hyksos, the very invaders who ruled Egypt for a century. The Egyptians did not simply copy this technology, they perfected it. The simple bow, made from a single piece of wood, had been known since time immemorial, but its power was limited. The composite bow was a complex construction made of several materials. Its base was made of wood, but plates of horn were glued to the inside, facing the archer, and animal sinew to the outside. This sandwich of materials worked like a spring. Horn resisted compression well, and sinew resisted tension. When the archer pulled the string, enormous energy was stored in the bow. When the arrow was released, this energy was released, sending the arrow with tremendous force and incredible distance. Mastering this weapon required many years of training. The bow was very stiff, and drawing the string required not only strength, but also a special technique. Archers were the true elite of the Egyptian army, and their training began in their youth. Archers played a key role in battle. They were positioned either on the flanks of the infantry or behind its ranks. Before the clash, they rained thousands of arrows down on the enemy, creating a death zone. This barrage disrupted the enemy's formation, sowed panic, and thinned their ranks even before the hand-to-hand combat began. What if I showed you a time machine that would transport us into the thick of an ancient battle? That machine is the Egyptian war chariot. It was this super weapon that allowed Thutmose III and Ramses II to build their empires. The chariot was not just a vehicle, but a complex weapon platform that changed the rules of warfare. Like the composite bow, the chariot was a technology borrowed from the Hyksos. But the Egyptians turned the heavy and unwieldy Asian cart into a true marvel of engineering. The Egyptian chariot was incredibly light, fast, and maneuverable. The secret lay in its design. Its body was made of light wood and leather, and the floor was woven from straps, which provided shock absorption. The axle was shifted far back, making the platform very stable. But the main innovation was the spoked wheels. The crew consisted of two people, a driver and a warrior. The driver controlled a pair of horses, which were also a new technology for Egypt, and protected the crew with a large shield. The warrior was armed with a composite bow and a quiver full of arrows, as well as spears and a khopesh for close combat. The tactics of using chariots were revolutionary. They did not crash into enemy formations like medieval knights. That would have been suicide for such a light construction. Instead, they acted as mobile firing platforms, circling around enemy infantry. This carousel tactic was incredibly effective. The chariots wore down the enemy, disrupted their formation, created panic, and broke through their defenses. Only after the enemy infantry was disorganized and suffering losses did the Egyptian infantry attack to complete the rout. The chariot was the pinnacle of Bronze Age military thought. It perfectly combined mobility, protection, and incredible firepower. In the next chapter, we will talk about something that is often forgotten: defense. After all, it is not only those who strike who win, but also those who can withstand the blow. We have talked a lot about weapons designed for attack, but an army cannot win without effective defense. Egyptian armorers understood this perfectly well and created one of the most advanced defense systems of the time. Its main elements were the shield and armor, which also underwent a long evolution. The main means of defense for any Egyptian infantryman was a shield. Unlike the popular round shields, the Egyptian shield was large, rectangular, with a rounded top. It was made of light wood and covered with durable ox hide. This shape allowed the warrior to take cover almost completely from chin to knees. This shield was ideal for fighting in close formation. Soldiers locked their shields together, creating a solid wall, a turtle, from behind which they struck with spears. The center of the shield was often reinforced with a bronze plate, an umbo, which not only provided additional protection, but could also be used to strike. Lighter and more mobile shields existed for light troops and charioteers. They often had a teardrop or octagonal shape, allowing the warrior to be more mobile while providing adequate protection for vital organs. Shields were not just protection, but an active element of combat. As for armor, most of the infantry did not have it. The mass army was protected only by shields and possibly simple leather helmets or quilted caps. Armor was the privilege of the elite, officers, charioteers, and warriors of the Pharaoh's guard. Early armor consisted of simple cuirasses made of thick leather. However, with the development of metallurgy and under the influence of their Asian enemies, the Egyptians mastered the production of complex scale armor. This was the pinnacle of Bronze Age armor technology. Such armor consisted of hundreds of small bronze plates, or scales, which were sewn onto a sturdy leather or fabric base. The scales overlapped each other, creating a flexible but very durable covering. It did not restrict movement, but at the same time provided excellent protection against arrows, sword blows, and spears. An empire cannot exist without the ability to capture cities. The Pharaohs' conquests in Syria and Palestine were not just field battles. They were a series of sieges of well-fortified city-states. The Egyptian army developed a whole arsenal of siege equipment and tactics to crush the most impregnable walls. The main tool of any siege was the battering ram. Egyptian battering rams were massive logs, often with bronze tips. They were either carried by special troops or, more perfectly, this shed, or turtle, protected the soldiers, swinging the battering ram from arrows, stones, and boiling tar that the besieged threw from the walls. The warriors rolled this structure up to the gate, or the weakest section of the wall, and methodically, hour after hour, struck one spot until the masonry gave way. Another important element was siege ladders. This was the simplest but also the most risky method of assault. Special assault troops, under the cover of archers, had to run up to the wall, place the ladders against it, and try to climb up, engaging in battle right on the crest of the wall. To protect the assault troops, the Egyptians used large portable shields called mantlets. These were essentially mobile wooden walls that soldiers pushed in front of them to protect themselves from fire. They allowed them to safely approach the walls to set up ladders. Sappers were another important siege weapon. These demolition experts dug tunnels under the walls. Their task was either to simply bring down the wall by removing its supports or to dig a secret passage directly into the city. It was slow, painstaking, and incredibly dangerous work. The Egyptians also made active use of siege towers. These were tall wooden structures on wheels that were rolled up to the walls. Archers were positioned at the top of the tower, firing accurately at the defenders on the walls, clearing the way for the assault troops with ladders. When we talk about the Egyptian army, we often imagine sand and chariots, but we forget that the entire civilization was built around the river. The Nile was the country's main transport artery. It is therefore not surprising that the Egyptians became skilled shipbuilders and created a powerful military fleet, which was another tool of their imperial policy. Early Egyptian boats were made from bundles of papyrus. They were light and fast, ideal for traveling on the Nile. However, military purposes and sea voyages required stronger and larger ships built from wood, mainly imported cedar. Egyptian warships were hybrid. They could be propelled by both sail and oars. This gave them mobility regardless of the wind. The sail was large and rectangular, and the rowers sat in rows along the sides. There were platforms for warriors at the bow and stern. The main task of the fleet was to transport troops. It was much faster and easier to move an army by ship along the Nile or along the Mediterranean coast to Syria than to march it on foot. The ships carried not only soldiers, but also food, horses, chariots, and siege equipment. But the fleet was also used for naval battles. The most famous of these was Ramses III's battle with the peoples of the sea. Reliefs in the Medinet Habu temple show this battle in detail. The Egyptians' tactics were simple but effective. Their ships approached the enemy, and archers on the masts and decks showered them with arrows. Then the ships drew closer, and the boarding battle began. Egyptian marines armed with spears, axes, and hoplites jumped onto enemy ships. Many Egyptian ships had a bronze-clad ram attached to their bows. Although it may not have been as effective as later Greek rams, it could still cause serious damage to the side of an enemy ship or break its oars. We have looked at weapons, armor, chariots, and ships. But the Egyptian Empire had another, perhaps the most important weapon, which is rarely mentioned. That weapon is logistics. An ancient commander could have the best swords and the bravest warriors, but without food, water, and ammunition, his army was doomed to defeat. Egypt, thanks to its unique bureaucratic system, perfected the art of supply. The entire economy of the country was built on strict accounting and distribution of resources. The same mechanism was used to supply the army. Entire departments of scribes were in charge of military logistics. They meticulously calculated how much grain, dried fish, beer, weapons, and clothing would be needed for the campaign. Huge warehouses throughout Egypt were filled with supplies ready to be sent to the front. The main transport artery was the Nile. Barges loaded with thousands of tons of food headed north to the borders of the empire. Along the Levant coast, support bases and ports were established where ships could replenish their supplies and unload equipment for the army operating in Syria. On land, donkeys were the main means of transport. Huge caravans of thousands of donkeys carried supplies behind the advancing army. Managing such a caravan was a difficult task that required precise organization and protection. The Egyptians were masters at organizing marches. The army did not move as a chaotic crowd. It was divided into divisions, each with its own supply train and source of supplies. Special units were created to find water, set up camp, and bake bread. This well-oiled machine allowed Egypt to conduct long military campaigns thousands of kilometers from home. While enemy armies quickly depleted their resources, being forced to plunder the countryside for food, the Egyptian army had a stable supply line from the rear. We have taken a journey through the arsenal of ancient Egypt, from the simple spear to the most complex system of military logistics. It becomes clear that the Egyptian empire was built not only on the wisdom of priests, but also on the power of weapons. Each of these inventions, whether original or borrowed, was refined and integrated into a single, ruthless military machine. This machine allowed a small kingdom in the Nile Valley to become the ruler of the known world. It combined the discipline of mass infantry, the power of composite bows, and the incredible mobility of chariots. What other topics from the military history of the ancient world would you like to see on our channel? Perhaps you are interested in the weapons of Assyria or the tactics of the Roman legions? Share your ideas in the comments and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our new episode.